Bueno, porque ustedes lo pidieron y ya saben que siempre estamos buscando gente extraordinaria con quien hablar y con quien aprender más. Está con nosotros Robin Sharma. Y muchos de ustedes lo conocen porque conocen sus libros, los han leído como El Club de las 5 de la mañana, El líder que no tenía cargo, El monje que vendió su Ferrari, Ocho claves de liderazgo del monje, Sabiduría cotidiana del monje que vendió su Ferrari, El santo surfista, el ejecutivo, y Robin tiene un nuevo libro que se llama Los 8 hábitos ocultos para una vida plena, la riqueza que el dinero no puede comprar. Y buscamos a Robin por cielo, mar y tierra porque esa es nuestra responsabilidad, tener a la gente más capaz donde esté en el idioma en el que hable. Así es que Robin, I gave you a great introduction. Since you live in Italy, I assume that there's a tidbit of Spanish that you probably got.
Yes, and thank you very much, Martha, and it's a pleasure to be on your show.
Okay, so the new book, let's talk about the new book. La riqueza que el dinero no puede comprar, the wealth that money cannot buy. I think that it's more important now than ever because we do agree that everybody is very obsessed with having, with acquiring, with being rich, with making money, with having things, with buying cars. And many are part of the immediate gratification culture generation.
You know, there's a lot of rich people and money is all they have. And for over 20 years, I've been mentoring a lot of the super rich billionaires, CEOs, sports superstars. And unfortunately, a number of them, a fair number of them, are cash rich and their life poor. And so you're right, society has sold us this hypnosis that if you have a big house, many Ferraris, lots of watches, all these material things, you're going to wake up, you're going to feel happy. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people who have a lot of things, but they're missing out on the other 7 forms of wealth that I talk about in the book. And I think to live a really rich life, financial freedom is important. There's no question, but the other 7 forms of wealth are terrifically important as well.
Okay, for sure, we're going to talk about that right now. But there's something I also want to discuss on the show, which has to do with this like never ending rat race that when we have either a psychologist or a therapist or a Buddhist, and we're trying to understand the true meaning and the true purpose of life and why we are in this world and what is our mission, it becomes very confusing because we talk a lot about success. And a lot of people define success with, for example, being rich or with being powerful or being famous. Therefore, we feel a tremendous emptiness in our soul at the end of the day when we've worked nonstop, when we've done everything we have to do, when, we've done a 9 to 5, but the kids, but life, paying mortgages. And then you sit down and ask yourself, is this truly what life is about? What is your perspective on that?
Well, it's a very thoughtful question, I have to say. And what I would say is this. First of all, let's go to some of the positive psychology. And there's a term called hedonic adaptation. I think it's a very important concept. Hedonic adaptation is the human ability to want something, and when we get it, it becomes our new normal. And so then we want the car, we get the car, and it becomes our new normal, and we want a better car. We want this partner for love, we get the partner for love, but we want someone even better. And so if we live like this, you're right, we end up as rats or hamsters on a wheel, and it's not enough. So it's something to think about. Second thing, there's a concept called the theory of holes. All of us have insecurities. And if we try to get something on the outside, a house, more followers on social media, a better car, more money, to fill a hole inside, it'll never work. So we need to fill our inner holes so that we can enjoy material things, but not need them for our self identity. And then the third thing I would say is money is important, material things are important, but one of the key messages in the Wealth Money Can't Buy is there are 8 forms of wealth. And that's really important. Money is only one of the 8 forms of wealth. The other forms of wealth we can talk about, like family. I know in Mexican culture, family is so important. So you can have a beautiful mansion, but if you're all alone, what's the point? The 7th form of wealth in the book, adventure. adventure is even more valuable than a large stock portfolio. So we need to explore all 8 forms of wealth for us to truly live a rich life.
Well, I love what you just said about hedonistic adaptation, because that is something that we've also discussed on the show. You always have this feeling that, maybe the day I lose 20 pounds, the day I have a house, or that I have the car that I always wanted, or a better job, or a better salary, just the day I can, make that trip to Europe, I will be happy. And then that day comes and you are super happy, and then it ends up wearing out until, again, you find yourself in the need to desire something else, something new, to fill in the gap again.
I'm exploring a new career, Martha, and the new career is the career of an artist, which really speaks to the 7th form of wealth of adventure. Long story short, I took the last 2 months off and I went to South Africa. And for 1 month, I painted every day and I fell in love with a new career. And on one of my new artworks, this was just kind of a download that came to me. I wrote these words: "The thought of keeping death close allows you to keep joy near." What I'm trying to say is another way we can find joy is remember that no matter how long we get to live, we're going to be dust. And all the people we might be trying to please in 100 years or 50 years, they will all be dead too. So that perspective that we all end up as dust, the kings, the queens, the billionaires, the street sweepers, reminds us that material things can be enjoyed. There's nothing wrong with them, but they're not going to ever provide us any real and lasting peace. And the last thing I'd say on that is serenity is the new luxury. Let's pursue that.
Absolutely. This is going to be sort of an example for the whole audience. Obviously, they need to read the book. You are edited in Mexico, by the way, by Editorial Grijalvo. So there are 8 very specific habits or keys for a wealthy and happy and fulfilling life. And when we've talked about, for example, the Happiness World reports, one of the key elements in a country being happy is the quality of your relationships. And I think that in Mexico and Latin America and many other countries in the world, being such a tribal society, we are very family oriented. We are very based on the relationships you have and the quality of the social interactions you have with the people that surround you.
I totally agree. The 3rd form of wealth is family. And related to that is friends. Grandma, we call her Nona, but she had a 90th birthday a few years ago. And I took her aside. I found a few moments to sit down with this 90-year-old woman who is such a wise soul and has such a good heart. And I asked her, I said, you've lived a long life. What's most important? And she said, oh, family. And, I look at my relationship with my parents and the relationship with my family, and that's worth a lot more than money in the bank. Now, we do live in a world where there's a cost of living crisis, and I'm in no way dismissing the importance of having money to put a roof over our heads and food on the family table and provide for our responsibilities. It's very, very important. I think we run into trouble, Martha, when our money becomes our God. And when we chase material things because we see people perhaps on social media, and we are tribal, you're absolutely right. And the science is mirror neurons and emotional contagion. So we see these people we respect on social media, and they're showing the cars and the jets, and they're in the nice restaurants. And we think, oh, if we do that, we too will be cool. We too will be happy. But may I ask you, why don't we celebrate the person who has the amazing family life and say, that's a really rich person? Why don't we celebrate the gardener in our neighborhood who keeps the community clean and the flowers beautiful? Why don't we put on a pedestal the teacher who, in difficult resources, raises young children to be visionaries? So I think our value system is, I'm not judging, I'm just reporting, but I think our value system in our world right now isn't providing us with true joy.
Yes, and you were talking about the importance of family, and I think that in general, relationships, and it is so ironic. All of us who have very busy and complicated lives You're working with the kids, you have obligations, you have responsibilities, and then your life is filled up with all the things that you need to do and not necessarily with what you want to do. And I was telling the audience the other day that things that make you happy, spending time with the people you love, that adds something to your life and your soul, things that you enjoy doing is something that sometimes needs to be scheduled. Because if not, the most important and fulfilling things in life will not happen. In Spanish, I say, la vida hay que producirla, or life needs to be produced.
Sure, I totally agree. Let's go to some of the research. Martha, according to a report I recently read, the average person is spending 4.7 hours a day on social media and playing with their digital devices. I need to say that again, 4.7 hours a day. That amounts to 3 months every year. And for a lot of people, they're just distracting themselves with trivial videos of people dancing, etc. So I say this with a lot of respect, but a lot of human beings say, I don't have time, I'm busy. The question is, what are you so busy with? In the Wealth Money Can't Buy, there's a whole section on the power of minimalism and the power of removing digital distraction from your life. So I think the people who live beautiful lives and rich lives, these people are very clear on what their priorities are. And to your point about a schedule, the things that get scheduled are the things that get done. And I think it's important to write things down on your schedule in terms of family times and whatever. But I want to be clear, the book is based on 8 forms of wealth. We can get into those 8 forms of wealth. Family is the 3rd form of wealth. Money is the 5th form of wealth. There are 6 other forms of wealth.
Agree, totally agree. Now let's talk, Robin, about work. And I don't know if you know this number, but the last time I checked, it's like 97.7% of humanity hates their job.
Yes. So, I mean, there's a number of answers I could give you for that. I think, first of all, a lot of people are in jobs because they don't think they have any freedom. A lot of people have given away their power and say, well, I don't have a choice. And unfortunately, a lot of us behave as victims, and you can always tell a victim because they give their power away to external excuses. But today someone's going to start a business with an iPhone. Today someone's going to come up with an idea to be a painter and become the next Picasso. So it is possible. So the first thing I would say is a lot of us stay in jobs that stain our soul because we don't have any choice. But just because you can't see a choice doesn't mean you don't have many options. And then the second thing I'd say is you're right. Our work is a source of joy. I've been writing books and giving presentations, and it's really my oxygen. And I'm not saying I'm some kind of a guru and every day is wonderful for me, but I adore what I do, and I hope to be speaking and writing books until my last breath. And I think, Carl Jung said something very interesting. He said, when you don't have a purpose in your life, you escape into pleasure. And I think a lot of us, work is not just work to put money on the table. Work provides incredible enthusiasm. And it provides a sense of purpose, that we're making a difference, that we're spending our gifts and our talents that God has put into us well. No matter if you're a barista, a taxi driver, or a billionaire, all work has dignity. And so when we find work that has a sense of purpose, then we stop seeking these trivial pursuits with too much alcohol or too much social media. Last thing I'd say on that is, you don't have to leave your job to find a sense of purpose. You can, it's like a coffee shop. Often there's 4 people who can't stand their job, but there's one barista who says, this is my craft and I want to be great at it. And I want to be positive to the people who come into the coffee shop and make a difference in people's lives. So often you don't have to leave your job to find purpose. You just have to shift your perspective to look for opportunities to grow and make a difference in other people's lives.
Well, that is another form of wealth in your book, which is growth. And I think that is the biggest gift that we give our audience on this show. We are absolutely obsessed with growth. And even though we are a Spanish-speaking country, I always tell my audience that I feel totally obliged to look for the most extraordinary voices, the most inspiring people and doctors and therapists in the world, to enhance and broaden our scope of thought about what life is about, and to give us the tools to become the most possible, best version of ourselves, and growing is being wealthy.
The first form of wealth out of the 8 forms of wealth in the Wealth Money Can't Buy is growth. And again, our society doesn't celebrate people because you're growing, to learn to meditate or write in a journal or to read wise books or to build intimacy with your gifts and your talents or to steadily and incrementally do the things that frighten you so you grow braver and stronger and wiser.
Absolutely.
That makes you rich.
I think that your 8th form of wealth is incredibly touching. It's about serving others. And I have to tell you the story. My father has a great word play in Spanish. It says, la persona que no sirve, no sirve, which in English would be those who don't serve are basically worthless. And I think that's what my dad says all the time, trying to talk about the responsibility that you have to use your talents or your privilege to serve others and to help others. And that's your 8th form of wealth.
Well, I think you have a very wise father. Martha, I have a very wise father too. He's 87 years old. And when I was growing up, he said something on this 8th form of wealth in the Wealth Money Can't Buy. And his words were, Robin, when you were born, you cried while the world rejoiced. Live your life in such a way that when you die, the world cries while you rejoice. And some people might think, well, service and helpfulness and usefulness is not practical. I think it's one of the most practical things you can do to be helpful to others, because when you help someone else, it's such a paradox, but you help yourself. The more we help others, the more we love ourselves. The more we help others, the more we bring joy to ourselves. The more we help others, the more we really become rich. So it sounds like an idealistic thing, but being the most helpful person is extraordinarily powerful for a happy, peaceful, and good life.
So what I just told the audience in Spanish after speaking to you for half an hour is maybe your work is something that you don't feel very passionate about or that doesn't make you very happy, but that doesn't mean that you don't have many other alternatives to be passionate about something or to find passion in other things. And the 7th form of wealth that you talk about in the book is adventure.
Sure. The science confirms that the human brain craves novelty. And so one of the traps a lot of human beings fall into is we live the same year 85 times and we call it a life. I think it's incredibly important to break our rhythm. It's incredibly important to get lost once a week. It's incredibly important to have conversations with weird people. It's incredibly important to read books that you find are strange and explore. I think it's incredibly important to go to visit the places that scare you. So what I'm trying to do in that 7th form of wealth is to remind people that you don't want to be dead man or dead woman or dead person walking. Society says if you fail, you've done something wrong. I think if you take a risk and you fail, you've done everything right because you've grown and you've created more adventure. It makes me think of one of my favorite quotes, and it's actually a Mexican proverb. And the Mexican proverb says, they tried to bury us. They didn't know we were seeds. And part of adventure is not just having fun and exploring and traveling and meeting new people. Part of adventure is saying, I'm going to do something I'm scared to do and that's difficult. And you get knocked down, but you get back up.
Okay, so let's pause the book for a second, because while I hear you talking, I'm thinking, how has this man's life been? So I want to talk to you about you. It's an alternative career, writing, that can be very risky. So I would love for you to share with the audience your journey and how you became a wealthy person in every sense of the way, I assume, following your passion, because you haven't been a writer all your life.
Well, I used to be a litigation lawyer.
Excuse me, for real? A lawyer?
It's pretty much what you were talking about. I was a very successful lawyer. I had a lovely home, a great car, and I'd wake up every morning and I'd look in the mirror and I didn't like the person looking back at me. That's really the wealth money can't buy. That's what the book's about. I had done everything the world said, well educated, making great income, and I'd wake up and I was completely empty. How was that rich in any way? And so what I've learned is your heart is much wiser than your head. Head is the sum total of logic, which is based on the knowledge the world has taught you. Your heart, or your instinct, or call it intuition, is your natural wisdom. You have it, I have it, and your millions of listeners and viewers have it as well. And it's so counterintuitive to say, like, for example, your scenario with your daughter, if she said, I want to be a writer. If she felt that here, then there is such truth, such power, such wisdom. And even if the world said to your daughter, you're crazy, I would say follow it. Because the world said Galileo was crazy. The world said Tim Berners-Lee, who innovated the internet, was crazy. Jonas Salk, the inventor of penicillin, was crazy. They call the great visionaries crazy before they respect them as history makers. So for some reason, I had an instinct to write these books.
No, but okay. Don't give me an executive summary. So you're a lawyer with a biology degree, and then one day you woke up and said, I'm going to write books?
Yes, right. I mean, what happened was I was a litigation lawyer, but I was very unfulfilled. And there was just a very strong urge to start writing. And my dad had always filled the home with self-help books. Yoga, meditation, Dale Carnegie, Norman Vincent Peale, How to Win Friends and Influence People, autobiographies, Mandela, Gandhi. And so I decided to write a book called The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari. And Martha, it's easy to say, well, I can't do that. I don't know how to do it. Carol Dweck talks about the growth mindset. People who create rich lives say, I might not know how to do something, but I'll watch a YouTube video or I'll read a book and I'll learn how to do it. It's the growth mindset. So I wasn't an author, but I went to a self-publishing course. I paid $37. I learned how to self-publish. There used to be a copy shop. You've heard of it, Kinko's Copy Shop.
Of course.
And I self-published The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari in a Kinko's Copy Shop. And I started going to bookstores. And if I can do it, any one of your listeners can do their dream as well. And I'd have 5 copies of the book and I'd say, could you please keep this book? And they'd say, fine, we're not going to pay you. And if we sell it, we'll pay you. And if not, come back and pick up your book. And this is how I started off with The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari. And step by step, if you don't get distracted and you stay focused and you want to serve and you do it with deep belief, people feel your enthusiasm and they start to believe in you. And so bookstores started carrying the book. And interestingly, publishers, India, Israel, wherever, Middle East, Japan, Mexico, started coming to me and saying, we want this book, The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari. And the book is now sold, 8 million, 10 million copies, but that's how I started. And I just started writing more and more books. And if I may, a quick story, my dad, there was one bookstore close to my neighborhood where every time I go in there, it was the only bookstore early on where my book was on the bestseller list. So I go in there every week and I look at this bookstore and it was like a shot in the arm. I got so excited. My book is a bestseller. So I talked to my dad about a year ago. He said, that book in our neighborhood sold a lot of your books. I said, yeah. He said, that's because I was buying all your books.
I cannot believe it. But you know what? This is a perfect example for our listeners who might be hesitant, who don't trust themselves enough to think that they can, that they will be able to, that there is a possibility. And you are a perfect example, Robin, that where there's a will, there's a way. But the question is, were you scared?
I want to be honest with you, as always. I wasn't scared about leaving my profession because it just felt so strong. But I've been scared a lot in my life. I was in Mexico City recently, and I spoke to a very large audience. But there was a time where in biology, if I would speak in they were called labs. If I would speak in front of 20 people, I was terrified. So we know this, but the more you do something you are frightened to do, you normalize it and it becomes your new normal. So it's really important. I mean, one of the things I talk about in The Wealth Money Can't Buy is hard is easy and easy is hard. Society says do easy things, you'll have a great life. I think if you live the easy path, just watch TV all day long, hang out with easy people, easy conversations, read easy books, eat the easy food, you're going to have a hard life. And paradoxically, and it's not spoken about in our culture, but if you do hard things, read hard books, have hard conversations, choose hard projects, be the person at work, I'll do that, no one else will, you'll have the easiest life.
Can we be friends?
We already are.
You mustn't ever come back to Mexico again and not sit down and have coffee with me.
I would love to. We'll have to have a great meal together. It would be a real pleasure.